So we are in our last session of the day. A couple reminders, you are able to have translation. So if you click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen, you can choose whether to listen in English or in French. On that same note, if you have questions, you're able to ask in both English and French. A note from the translators, if you are speaking to the group, try and do so a bit slowly so he can have a chance to catch up. So I think that's all my technology notes. If everyone's ready, I'll hand the floor over. We have Alexandra Dufour and Tara Carney here from Global Affairs, and they're going to give an update on this year's CAP process.
Bonjour à tous, mon nom c'est Alexandra Dufour, comme Iseline l'a dit. Je suis le point focal du HRN à MHD, donc à GAC. J'étais aussi le Coordination Lead pour le CAP 2020 et je couvre aussi la programmation en Amérique du Sud. Donc, ça va être moi qui vais donner la mise à jour de l'AMC sur le CAP. Et puis, par contre, comme Iseline l'a dit, on a Tara Carney qui est sur la ligne. Serge Koskinen aussi devrait se joindre. Puis Marie-Hélène Ayot-Rivard que vous avez rencontrée à la dernière rencontre annuelle. Donc, vous allez voir que le PowerPoint est plutôt superficiel. Donc, si vous voulez écouter attentivement. Et puis, je vais faire la présentation en anglais. Donc, si jamais il y a des questions, par contre, n'hésitez pas à les poser dans les deux langues. Puis, je vais m'arrêter après chaque sous-section pour ouvrir aux questions au besoin. Donc, aujourd'hui, today I'll be speaking about CAP 2020 data and then a little bit more about strengths and challenges of NGO submissions. And then we can go into next steps, lessons learned, and some questions that we got. Aislinn had gathered some of the questions from the membership ahead of time, but if there's anything else that comes up, please feel free to ask us. So if we go into the data, so as you can see on those graphs, this year for the CAP process, we got over 300 concept notes, both for Middle East CAP and Global CAP. Of those, about almost 100 made it to the proposal stage, so about 32% of the initial submissions, and 56 were funded in the end. 56 represents about 57% of the 98 proposal that we got and 18% of the initial 311. We accepted submissions in 20 countries, which included Venezuela regional. I counted it as one just because it was easier. And then we funded projects in 18 of those countries. So we tried to be quite targeted in the eligible country list that we shared with you last August. And that included 7 countries in Africa, 3 in Asia, 3 in LAC, and 5 in the MENA region that we ended up funding. So every year we've been trying to provide additional guidance and parameters for NGO submissions, including the countries eligible for funding, like I said, based on the feedback that you have been providing to us. So we're really grateful for your time and your recommendations every year, including in the most recent CAP 2020 HRN report. It's still not a perfect process, but we've tried to be more specific and targeted. So in CAP 2019, for instance, we had accepted concept notes in 24 countries, which included Central America and Venezuela regional, again, counted as one. But we funded project in 19 of those countries. So this year it was 18 countries instead of the initial 20. We've also tried to reduce the burden on NGOs at the proposal stage. So you can see that there's a significant drop in the number of concept note versus proposals. So hopefully that has helped reduce your workload. We've seen in the HRN report that members seem to think the 2-step process was helpful. And I think we can definitely say that it has also been helpful on our end in reducing our workload. The regional split is reflective of the proportional needs in each of those regions. So you can see that the majority of the projects are in the MENA regions with 22 projects. Although it's important to note that countries in that region benefit from additional funds in the department apart from our usual CAP budget, which also help explain why our number of projects is a little bit higher in that region. And then finally on data, none of the programmatic initiatives that we received made it to the proposal stage. So we had received 6 submissions, 3 in Africa, 3 in LAC. And like I said, none of them made it to the next stage, but we are continuing to think about this piece and we'll definitely work on it over the next few months with you in trying to better understand what we want from it. So do you have any questions on data so far? Otherwise, I'll jump to the next section.
And just a reminder, you can either type them in or I think we have enough time. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask them orally.
So I can't actually see the chat right now. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Oh well, thanks, Stacy. Yes, the PowerPoint will be shared at the end of the presentation. Okay, so if that's it for now, I'll go more into the strengths and challenges of NGO submissions. So overall, I think the concept notes and the proposals were a lot stronger this year and more targeted than they were last year, for instance. So hopefully the two-step process was clearer as well for you. The feedback that we're providing now is definitely not a reflection on the quality of the submissions, but rather more an attempt to explain what makes a difference in submissions given the competitive nature of our process and of the finite resources that we have. So most of the submissions were pretty good, and we do want to thank you for your work and your efforts. It's reflected in your projects, and it's very appreciated. So the general feedback or the main concern that we often have with submissions at both stages is usually about the lack of specificity of the information in the submissions. So we do recognize that there's a limited number of pages per template, but the more details we have on each of those sections, the easier it becomes for us to better understand the project and the value added of you as a partner. So ideally, partners would provide a clear indication of the proposed approach in a concise manner. And we understand that being concise is sometimes easier in certain sectors versus others. Some organizations also have more facility than others, but either way, that's sort of what we look for. And so at both stages, but especially at the concept note, given the high number of submissions that we got, the biggest challenge is usually around the rationale. And so that means a little bit like Serge mentioned this morning during his COVID update, we want to see the value added of you as an NGO, but also of why. So you as an NGO in the targeted sectors that you are targeting, and then in the given geographic area that you are suggesting. So often one or two of these elements are put forward, but the strongest concept notes and proposal usually address all three. Having a strong rationale also means having evidence-based initiatives. So you all know that, but for us, this means understanding how your project fits within HRPs and HNO, and how are you using those needs assessments. Have you done your own needs assessments? Were they done before the concept note was suggested or submitted? Were they done before the proposal was submitted? How and when did you use that data to inform your intervention? And ideally, those assessments are done not just at one level, but at multiple, so national levels, subnational, and local levels as well. Having a strong rationale on top of being evidence-based also mean explaining all the different elements of your projects. And so often you will explain one or multiple of these elements, but not all of them. For it, the biggest example I have is on multi-year. So you will not necessarily specifically state what's the value added of doing multi-year versus a standalone project. And so this is the kind of details that we're looking for. Why are you in that specific area? Why are you targeting these communities? Why should we go towards an NGO instead of UN or Red Cross? What is your value added in that sector? So that's a little bit more on the general feedback. We had understood that the membership was interested in hearing a little more on the gender lenses and on GE and SRHR sections. So I'll give a little bit of an overview on that just now. But if you have any questions on the feedback, feel free to share them in the chat, and I can answer as they come in. So on GE, so I think a little bit like I just gave for the general feedback, what's the most important for us is understanding how your assessments are informing your interventions. So when you're doing a GE assessment, an SRHR assessment, how are the gaps that you identified addressed by your project? That being said, having a strong GE and SRHR sections for us means different things. One of them being the collection and analysis of sex and age disaggregated data, the participation of beneficiaries to both your GE assessments, but also to the project configuration. Having intersectional assessments. So what are the needs of the different communities that you're targeting? If you're targeting Indigenous communities, do they have specific needs? If you're targeting host communities versus migrants and refugees, are the needs the same or are they different? Assessments at multiple level, a little bit like I said on the rationale earlier, what we usually see for general assessment is that you will give a clear local, a clear national overview, sorry, in the GE section. So you will be very explicit in what are the needs in the country and what is the gender equality situation in the country, but not necessarily specifically in the local area that you're targeting. So having that information is also super useful for us. And then finally, having also, so your own needs assessment or the relevant needs assessment that you are using from other organization is fine with us. It's more, what's the explanation? So why are those assessments relevant to your project? Why are you using those? So as you can see, we try to look at GE throughout the entire proposal and not just in the GE and SRHR sections. And so that's our main consideration when we want to see how it's integrated throughout the entire project. A common challenge that we've noted, obviously apart from the opposite of everything I just said, is about men and boys. And so often men and boys are included in awareness activities, but there is a limited explanation as to how their inclusion could help reduce violence or increase social acceptance for women and girls. So it's often implied, but not necessarily explained. And it's a little bit that details that's missing in some context. So all this being said, we obviously recognize as MHD our limited expertise on GE and SRHR. We don't pretend to be GE specialists, that we know that even the specialists that we have in our department are not necessarily always familiar with the humanitarian context and challenges that come with it. So if you have any suggestions on training or guidance or online documents that you could share with us, we're definitely open to sharing that with our officers to increase our ability to better evaluate your GE and SRHR assessments. And then lastly, on that section, I just want to reiterate that the projects that include an SRHR intervention are not considered stronger or better than any other projects. We've tried to include that in our guidelines last summer. We've talked about it at the various triannual meetings, but just so it's clear, it is not a consideration for us when we evaluate your projects. Any questions on this so far? So, question on the link to the HNO by Jessica from Plan. Is this criteria apply at the proposal stage only, given the timeline on the HNO developments versus development of the CAP concepts? So usually at the concept note stage, it's, well, most organizations will mention the previous year HNO or HRPs, and that's fine with us. Like, obviously, we understand that you don't have this information, and neither do we. But yes, definitely a little more towards the proposal stage, as long as you also use previous year's assessment to identify where the needs are. Okay, if there's no other questions for now, I just wanted to give a little bit of feedback on the environment section as well, just because we've seen some common challenges or opportunities in that section. So similarly to GE, the most common challenge in the environment section is the lack of details on the mitigation measures. So often issues will be identified, but the mitigation measures are not necessarily explained. And so we want to know how you will respond to those external negative environmental impacts that you have identified. That being said, strong environment sections also usually include how the project will have positive environmental impacts and not just limited to the mitigation of negative environmental externalities. And then lastly, on environment, we know that the proposal, well, because that's only at the proposal stage, but we know that the proposal has a limited number of pages. And so we've tried to include the organization or the NGO's overall environmental policies through our institutional profile process. And so when you're writing that section, there's no need to dive in or to even write about your policies. We take that into account from the IP process. And so we would prefer that you focus on the environmental considerations, whether they be positive or negative, instead of going in details into your environmental policies. So hopefully that makes sense for everyone. If we go a little more onto next steps and lessons learned. So as I said earlier, a little bit at the beginning of the presentation, we've really appreciated the time that the membership has taken, both in CAP 2019 and then again in CAP 2020, for submitting reports. They've been really useful for us, and it's a lot easier for us to find a common ground when the requests are as clear as they were in both reports. And so we do take into account your recommendations and your feedback. It seemed like the CAP process was overall kind of positive for a lot of you, and we're really happy about that. We noted the comments on the theory of change, the budget, and the programmatic approaches. Similarly to what we did last summer, we are going to do a review of our guidelines to take into account that feedback and to address it to the best of our ability, obviously. We do hope to have a continuous engagement with HRN on this, like we did last summer with the guidelines, on whatever modifications you see are needed or what remains unclear. So we will be doing that over the next few weeks and months. On the programmatic front, given we're not exactly clear yet on our end as to exactly what we want from it and how we want to proceed with it, it won't be part of CAP 2021 cycle. If you have any questions on this, please feel free to ask us. Tara is on the line as well, so will be useful for this. On CAP 2021, we are going to try to follow a similar timeline that we did for CAP 2020. Like you mentioned in the report, it seemed to have been positively received, except for some aid holiday with the Middle East process. Hopefully that will not be too much of an issue this year. We are going to try to not have any parallel process. We're hoping. So far it seems like it's going to work, but we never know. But yes, we will try to follow the same timelines as we did last summer. So that means earlier engagement in the early summer, so ideally June, where we can inform you of our planned timelines, and then a launch at the end of summer, early fall. And then finally, the IPs will not need to be renewed this summer, so that's great for all of us. But our corporate branches are still trying to understand some partner processes. So you may still require to submit some additional documents based on new due diligence if needed. And we may just put you in direct contact with our corporate teams if that's easier, just to avoid some of the issues that we had this year, as some of you know, in March and April. So that's all I have for the update. We can go into the questions that we got online, but I just want to open it up for questions right now before addressing those that we received ahead of
time. Hi Alexandra, this is Séverine from Plan Canada. Bonjour, ça va?
Ça va bien, toi?
Oui, merci. Je vais mettre ma caméra aussi. Hop. So, merci beaucoup pour la présentation qui est bien intéressante. J'ai une question concernant la première slide qui a été montrée sur la répartition géographique des projets. Donc, je suis un petit peu surprise de voir, enfin, à demi surprise de voir que bon, l'Afrique a reçu énormément de notes succinctes, mais que le taux en fait de projets qui ont été approuvés à la fin représente un petit peu plus de 10%, environ 10-12% du nombre total. Comparativement parlant, en Asie, et en Moyen-Orient et en Amérique du Sud, les taux sont plus importants. Donc, je me demandais s'il était possible d'avoir des renseignements, enfin des informations sur la manière en fait dont les projets sont répartis, sachant que en Afrique il y a des crises humanitaires qui sont très sérieuses, je pense en Afrique centrale ou au DRC, et dans des pays où bien, le développement économique n'est pas forcément aussi important que par exemple au Moyen-Orient. Donc merci beaucoup.
Oui, absolument. Et je pense que je vais passer la parole à Tara pour ça, juste parce que c'est la directrice pour l'Afrique et le Moyen-Orient, donc je vais lui laisser répondre. Tara, si tu veux bien.
Alex.
You're welcome.
No, it's a good question. And I think as always with data, there's often an issue that we need to think about just in terms of, I mean, this is one piece of the picture. It's the number of proposals. It doesn't talk about the amount of funding that necessarily went to those proposals. So what we do at the beginning, as we're going through our part of the CAP process, is actually look at the money that we have available, so that we allocate envelopes across these regions in a proportional way. The exception being, as we've talked about before, presently the Middle East envelope is separate. So I think the stats on the Middle East are slightly skewed. So if we leave them out of the picture at this moment, across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, envelopes are done quite proportionally. And I think what we do tend to see in Africa, given the large scale and the protracted nature of the crises, a lot of our projects there actually are higher dollar value than the projects we're trying to ramp up a process. So it's smaller projects with more partners, so that we can actually get a coverage there. So there's a few different pieces that play into why these numbers look like they do. But I also think that the fact that there's so many countries in Africa with so many needs is reflective in the work that you folks do too, which is why we're seeing so many concept notes in Africa, because we know that the need is there. And unfortunately sometimes, and I do hope that eventually over time we get to a place where we can give you a better sense of not just the number of countries that we're looking at, but the type of activities in countries to hopefully narrow down that number of concept notes that are done at the beginning, so that there's a bit more clarity on how many we are likely going to be funding at the end. While it will never be an exact number, ideally we'll get to a place where there's just a few more parameters that will help shape that.
We've got some other questions. Séverine, are you okay? Est-ce que tu avais une question?
Non, merci. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Very helpful.
So Stacy from ACF, a quick process point on the budget. So it would be helpful under unit cost to remove additional info requests by adding the type. Okay, so we can definitely consider this when we do our review of the guidelines over the summer. I think we've made some modifications to the budget last year as well, but definitely we'll take that into account.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and say that budget is one of those places that I do hope we can do a bit of continued work with this group over the coming months before we relaunch, because I do think that's one of the places where we haven't really landed something that works both for us and for you in an easy enough way. So ongoing discussions on budget for sure.
And then there's a question on programmatic initiative. Yes, so essentially we are probably, well, we're not going to include it in the CAP 2021 process, just because we still haven't really figured out what we want out of it. But when we have more information, we will definitely share that with our partners. Any other questions?
Oui, bonjour, c'est Stéphane.
Bonjour Stéphane.
Une vidéo. Bonjour, j'aurais deux petites questions en fait. Donc la première question, c'est de savoir, est-ce que quand le processus va être lancé, quand est-ce qu'on pourrait avoir la liste des pays justement qui vont être choisis, pour que nous on puisse aussi se préparer par rapport à ça. Et l'autre question est sur le fait que on passe quand même de 96 notes conceptuelles à la moitié en fait qui est acceptée. Et je voulais savoir c'était quoi le rationnel derrière le fait de dire on va prendre plus de propositions pour en fait en financer moins, parce qu'au final ça demande du travail pour nous. Donc, pourquoi au final pas décider directement de dire, bon, bah, voilà les concept notes qu'on va prendre, et puis 50%, je trouve que c'est un taux très haut, en fait, pour des concept notes qui, au final, ont passé le test et qui étaient recevables. Et sachant que, en règle générale, la qualité est là sur les propositions. Donc, je voulais avoir un peu votre point de vue là-dessus.
Oui, donc en fait, au niveau des pays, d'habitude, on va partager la liste des pays en même temps qu'on fait notre courriel de lancement. Donc, ça va être plus vers la fin de l'été. Mais je pense qu'on va essayer de vous donner suffisamment de temps, un peu comme on l'a fait avec le Global CAP l'année dernière, pour écrire les notes conceptuelles. Donc, je pense que l'année passée, vous avez eu 7 semaines pour l'écrire. Je sais pas si on va suivre 7 semaines parce que là, ça impliquait le Moyen-Orient dans ce temps-là. Mais on va vous donner suffisamment de temps pour que vous puissiez les écrire. Mais oui, la liste va être plus partagée vers la fin de l'été, à moins que je ne suis pas au courant. S'il y a autre chose, dis-le. Puis sur ta deuxième question, je pense qu'on a tendance à accepter plus de notre conceptuel parce qu'on ne sait jamais c'est quoi notre budget par pays et par continent. Donc, on essaie d'en accepter le moins possible pour ne pas créer du travail inutile, mais en même temps, il y a toujours de l'incertitude de notre côté à savoir combien d'argent est-ce qu'on va avoir par pays. Et puis, c'est plus facile au moins de prendre des décisions une fois que le projet est présenté que de retourner aux partenaires après si on n'a pas suffisamment de projets pour le montant d'argent qu'on a. Tara, je ne sais pas s'il y a d'autres considérations que tu veux ajouter, mais moi, c'était ma compréhension. Est-ce que ça va, Stéphane, ou est-ce que tu as d'autres questions?
Peut-être une dernière, vu que tu me relances. Je voulais savoir en termes de pourcentage d'organisations non canadiennes qui auraient reçu des fonds par rapport à la première slide.
Je sais pas, j'ai pas l'information en ce moment, mais je pourrais définitivement te revenir là-dessus quand on va partager le PowerPoint.
Ok, merci.
S'il n'y a pas d'autres questions, la session va se terminer beaucoup plus tôt que prévu. Donc, n'hésitez pas, c'est votre chance de nous poser des questions. Vous pouvez attendre patiemment.
Ce n'est pas une question, mais ce sera un commentaire de vous remercier en fait pour ce travail en fait, de la transparence par rapport à tous ces chiffres, tout ça. J'ai l'impression que c'est un peu la première fois qu'on a ce genre d'information qui est présentée de manière aussi systématique. Donc, je trouve ça très bien. Donc, merci beaucoup.
Super. On est content. Ben, on avait vu dans les différents rapports que c'était un des commentaires, donc une communication plus ouverte et plus systématique, comme tu as dit, donc chaque année. Fait qu'on va essayer de continuer dans cette voie-là, c'est sûr.
Any other questions for Alex at this point?
Petite question rapide, Alexandra. Quand on parle du problème de ne pas connaître les budgets par pays à l'avance, on comprend bien, vous apprenez ça en général au moment de l'apparition du budget fédéral ou vous avez quelques indications avant ça?
C'est une très bonne question. Je ne suis pas trop au courant, en fait, des différentes timelines à ce niveau-là. J'ai l'impression qu'on en entend un peu plus parler en début d'année, mais je vais juste laisser Tara confirmer.
It's a tough one because we generally have a base budget. So as a humanitarian program, we do have a base. It is nowhere near. We don't start the year with anywhere near what we finish the year with. So when we launch the CAP process, we have our best guess of what the overall envelope for CAP is going to be. But we don't know necessarily, given the amount of time we now take to do CAP, that what we start with is going to be what we have when the officers actually come forward with their recommendations, which is where that slight flex at country level comes in. And that also gives us the flex as the HNO comes out, the GHO comes out, to be able to make those adjustments between countries, which is why we don't really nail down those country envelopes firmly, until, usually we don't nail them down firmly till about January.
Thank you. And in terms of the split between multilateral funding and NGO funding for a given country, when in the process, in the timeline, does that decision happen?
So we have a general idea towards the beginning of the process, and that's part of what helps us to figure out which countries are going to be part of the list or not. And in part, that's based on what happened the previous year and the change that we've seen in the context over the year. We don't ask for NGO funding in countries where the budgets are very, very small. So in countries where we're talking about $1–2 million budgets, it's unlikely that we're going to be asking for NGO funding, knowing that we're going to get proposals in and have room for at most a very small project. So we do have early indications that helps us shape those country lists. That doesn't mean that something can't change again from the beginning to the end, which means that that split ends up changing somewhere along the way, but we try.
Thanks.
So we got a question, Marie-Christine Garot de Humanité Inclusion. Est-ce que la moyenne des budgets alloués par région, Afrique, Asie, Lac, MENA est similaire? Ben, comme on a dit, il y a un budget différent donc, pour le Moyen-Orient. Fait que c'est sûr que ce budget-là, celui-là d'ailleurs, on le sait d'avance, donc c'est sûr que ça aide. Mais oui, normalement, si je comprends bien, il y a un plus gros budget pour l'Afrique, puis ensuite, parce qu'il y a plus de pays, il y a plus de crises. Mais ensuite, au niveau de l'Asie, puis de l'Amérique, les Amériques, c'est plutôt similaire. À moins que je me trompe, là, Tara, tu peux me corriger, mais je pense que c'était ça.
I mean, they're similar, but they're all designed based on what those HRP numbers come out at in a given year. So we don't have envelopes for Africa. We don't have envelopes by region, with the exception of the Middle East. We have a global envelope that naturally disaggregates in a very similar way, because the crises, though they evolve, are proportionally of the same magnitude, with the exception when something new happens. So Venezuela crisis, we saw a shift in the geographic dispersion of our portfolio. Rohingya crisis 2 years ago, now we saw a minor shift in the spread of the portfolio.
Now I'm just going to go over some of the questions that we got online, just so you can see them. So the first question, I'm not sure I fully understood it, but yes, we always obviously try to support efforts to ensure that local staff and beneficiaries aren't harmed as part of our programming. If that question was referring to COVID, I would refer you back to this morning's update, and same for number 2. But if you have any follow-up questions on these, please feel free to ask us. Number 3, does global affairs foresee, oh no, sorry, that's not the one. Number 3, how does GAC consider a partner's experience in working with local partners when evaluating proposals? So I think that we definitely recognize that local partners, obviously depending on the varying levels of capacity, are important players to improve access to certain regions, countries, help community acceptance, and the sustainability of the projects. And definitely also recognize that building the capacity of local partners is challenging within a 12-month time frame. But what we are interested in better understanding in your proposal is the mechanics of these partnerships. So what's the value added of both sides, and how do you work with each other? So how many local partners are you proposing, and why? Are you building on the local partners' expertise and experience? Are you acknowledging some of the weaknesses? What are they? What's the proportion of local admin costs, and for what proportion of project implementation? So these are just some of the questions that we take into consideration when we review that part. But if you have further questions, then again, feel free to ask us. Then the last questions that we had online was, does GAC consider the ability of an organization to privately fundraise when considering partnership? The quick answer for that was no, not from a programming perspective. When and if we do ask, is just to better understand the project as a whole and what pieces are funded by us versus other parties. But as you know, as part of the due diligence, the financial strength of the organization is definitely one of the elements that comes into the mix, and that will impact the final financial instrument that you get. Any other questions?
Actually, yes, sorry if I may. Just one more with regards to local partners. As part of the grand bargain or other commitments, does GAC aim to slowly increase or maintain the proportion of its funding going to local partners? And maybe I'm talking more specifically about the proportion of NGO funding here going to local partners. Is there any expected tendency?
Good question. Tara.
Let me jump in. So, I mean, I think to be in the spirit of transparency and to be very fair, localization agenda, we're extremely supportive of it. We see the value in those local partners. They're the ones that were there before, that will be there when we end. Very practically though, as many of you learned over the summer, going through due diligence on our side is not the easiest piece. And to be very frank, I think we're a ways off before we are doing more and more work with local partners. So I think what's really interesting to us is more how you folks see the value in them and can work with them. And if there's places where we can, and I think this is again a side conversation that probably is worth pursuing between the HRN and ourselves, is where you see the growth in the use of local partners and what that would mean in terms of us, like what those projects look like and how they're designed, so that it's still going through our usual partners, unless we find that local partners hit the point where their capacity is such that they can actually jump through the hoops that are needed for us to ensure due diligence requirements can be met.
Thanks.
We got another question on, could you please speak to the nature of involvement of Canadian Embassy consulate representative in the review of CAP proposals? To what extent are they involved in final decision making? So the way that we engage with our embassies usually is that those that have a development program or program officers on the ground will be involved in the review of concept notes sometimes, but mostly at the proposal stage usually. So concept notes, because it's such a high number, we don't always involve our embassies. We usually have more discussion with them as opposed to having them review the entire documents. Whereas at the proposal stage, we will have our embassies engage in reading and in giving their opinion on the partner, what have they heard on the ground, what are the strengths and weaknesses according to them of these submissions. In terms of the final decision making, we are a centralized program, so the final decision making always goes to us, but we do have those discussions and those sort of I guess broader group review if you want with them, but the decision always comes back to MHD.
Alexandra, c'est Séverine de nouveau. J'étais intéressée concernant le point sur l'égalité du genre. Donc, par rapport à l'évaluation d'ensemble sur les notes succinctes et les propositions reçues, quelle est l'appréciation de GAC sur le journey que les organisations, que les ONG sont en train de faire pour rencontrer en fait les objectifs de la FIAP? Est-ce que vous avez vu des améliorations au fil des ans par rapport à ce qui est proposé? Tout à l'heure, tu as parlé de ce qui peut être mis en lumière de meilleure façon, mais au niveau de la programmation, de la gender sensitive programming, quelles sont un petit peu les tendances? Est-ce que dans l'ensemble, est-ce que c'est mieux? Est-ce qu'il y a encore des gaps importants? Et voilà, j'étais intéressée de voir un petit peu l'appréciation qui a été faite par rapport à l'ensemble des propositions. Merci.
Oui, pas de problème. C'est sûr que moi, je suis un peu nouvelle quand même à MHD, donc j'ai pas nécessairement révisé les propositions à part l'année dernière, donc c'est juste ma deuxième année. Donc peut-être que, je sais pas, Marie-Hélène, je veux pas trop te mettre sur le spot, mais est-ce que tu pourrais peut-être parler plus des tendances que toi, tu as vues en tant qu'agent, puis maintenant en tant que directrice adjointe là-dessus?
Ça va continuer de ce côté-là. Désolée, juste pour peut-être résumer la question, pour que je m'assure de répondre à la bonne question, parce que c'est toujours un défi pour moi.
Juste les tendances, oui.
Les tendances au niveau du gender section, c'est ça?
Oui, puis l'amélioration ou pas, ou en tout cas, c'est quoi le journey que les ONG ont pris dans les dernières années par rapport à ça, puis les objectifs de la FIAP?
Je pense honnêtement qu'il y a eu des très belles améliorations de ce point de vue-là, que ce soit au niveau de la qualité de l'analyse qui était faite, comme Alexandra en a parlé, mais surtout de tenter de démontrer à quel point les actions qui sont proposées aident à répondre aux gaps qui sont identifiés par l'analyse telle quelle. Donc, je pense que ça a été un processus aussi où nous-mêmes, on a appris à décortiquer un peu la FIAP. La FIAP est quand même un processus, un document très, je dirais pas générique, c'est le mauvais terme, mais qui englobe beaucoup d'actions. Donc, le GRHA étant une composante parmi tant d'autres. Donc, de mieux comprendre qu'est-ce que ça veut dire et donc, c'est là qu'on en vient aussi à la conclusion que ça ne veut pas nécessairement juste dire de faire du SRHR. Donc, je pense qu'initialement, il y avait cette perspective-là, mais de vraiment plus aller avec l'intégration d'activités. Puis des fois, c'est pas nécessairement de réinventer la roue, mais juste d'avoir des considérations incluses à travers les activités. Donc, je pense qu'il y a eu cette transition-là. Personnellement, j'avais l'impression qu'au début, c'était très focusé sur la réponse en termes de santé sexuelle et reproductive, mais que vraiment de la FIAP, c'était, oui, une composante, mais vraiment plus une intégration des considérations qui sont axées sur le genre. Et donc, d'avoir une analyse de qualité, que ce soit de votre propre organisation ou des autres bailleurs, des autres partenaires aussi. Donc, il y a eu cette espèce d'amélioration-là du point de vue de la qualité des propositions, mais je pense aussi que le système humanitaire a aussi amélioré les analyses qui étaient faites, ce qui permet en retour de mieux intégrer des activités qui ne sont peut-être pas aussi clairement GRHA comme on le pensait au niveau du SRHR. Je ne sais pas si ça répond à la question, mais moi, personnellement, je pense qu'il y a eu une amélioration tant du point de vue des propositions, mais aussi, je pense, même à l'interne, de comment on est capable de mieux décortiquer ce que ça veut dire de faire du GRHA, de la Gender Responsive Humanitarian Action, et de ne pas juste aller uniquement dans la lentille santé sexuelle et reproductive, qui était peut-être une des premières composantes et une des plus faciles, pas au niveau de la programmation, mais une des plus faciles à identifier étant comme partie intégrante de la FIAP.
Merci Marie-Hélène. Et donc, on the flip side, donc de l'autre côté, donc ça c'est, vous avez parlé des points positifs, donc des améliorations. Est-ce qu'il y a encore des choses à améliorer, des points sur lesquels vous avez remarqué que bon, on peut encore apporter des améliorations?
Si je peux me permettre, peut-être, moi, c'est pas directement envers les propositions, quoi que ce soit, c'est après ça, la mise en œuvre, vraiment au niveau de, at the very lowest level of implementation, que ces considérations-là soient mises en œuvre. Donc, je pense qu'au niveau je suis désolée, c'est bilingue vraiment un peu, mais des guidelines qui sont développés par les acteurs humanitaires au niveau des propositions, les analyses sont là, mais au niveau de la mise en œuvre vraiment et des suivis, des évaluations, démontrer l'impact que ça a de faire ces activités-là, que ça soit par, justement, on parle de lampes solaires, d'avoir des verrous sur les latrines ou des choses comme ça. C'est vraiment très concret de prendre en compte que les spécialistes WASH tiennent compte des besoins des femmes pour quand vient le temps de développer, que ça soit un puits et donc qu'il soit assez haut pour pouvoir déposer le panier qui est sur la tête des femmes dans certaines communautés. Donc, des petites choses comme ça qui veulent peut-être vraiment démontrer que de la planification jusqu'à la mise en œuvre, il y a vraiment cette intégration-là. De notre point de vue, puis c'est un peu plus difficile d'être un programme centralisé, c'est peut-être la dernière étape, c'est de voir vraiment un changement au niveau de la mise en œuvre à tous les niveaux et pas seulement dans les secteurs qui sont peut-être plus, où les points d'entrée sont beaucoup plus faciles, mais vraiment de façon de facto, comme je dis, des fois des activités WASH ou des activités en sécurité alimentaire au niveau les plus bas avec les spécialistes, pas juste des spécialistes en genre, mais des spécialistes de tous les secteurs qui intègrent ce genre de considérations-là. Donc, c'est peut-être pour nous, ma réponse, juste un des derniers missing pieces of the puzzle.
Puis, en fait, je pense que c'est un peu aussi un des commentaires qu'on a fait au niveau de l'exemple avec les hommes et les garçons. Donc, souvent, sont impliqués dans les activités de sensibilisation, mais qu'il y a peut-être moins d'explications à savoir exactement comment est-ce que leur implication, ça va vraiment avoir un impact sur le terrain, puis ça va vraiment aider à réduire la violence ou l'intégration sociale des femmes et des filles. Fait que des fois, c'est juste en termes de proposition, je sais que Marianne parlait peut-être plus d'implémentation, mais dans la proposition en tant que telle, des fois, c'est juste de faire ces liens-là de façon un peu plus explicite.
Je veux pas mobiliser la conversation, mais j'ai une autre question. C'est par rapport à la composante environnementale. Donc celle-ci, on a vu cette année et dans le 8+3 reporting format pour faire écho à ce que disait Marie-Hélène, on fait le hodgepodge de l'anglais et du français là quand on travaille dans les deux langues. Mais donc par rapport à cette composante environnementale, on voit des éléments de rigueur un peu plus importantes qui sont en train d'être introduites avec des références qui sont faites donc par rapport aux paramètres de Global Affair. Mais est-ce qu'il y a peut-être de la même, peut-être pas aussi intense que ce qui s'est fait sur la dimension du genre, mais est-ce qu'il y a des discussions à l'interne sur la création de lignes directrices ou de notes techniques un petit peu plus détaillées pour comprendre un petit peu mieux les attentes de GAC par rapport à la composante environnementale, sachant que dans des contextes humanitaires, on n'est pas en mesure forcément de faire des évaluations environnementales aussi poussées que ce qui sont faites dans les contextes de développement. Mais voilà, quel est un petit peu le processus pour définir de manière peut-être plus détaillée les attentes? Est-ce qu'il y a moyen de... Voilà, merci.
Je ne sais pas s'il y a des lignes directrices qui sont en train d'être faites, donc peut-être Marianne pourrait parler un peu plus à ce niveau-là, mais au niveau, je pense que de notre côté, on essaie de mieux comprendre l'impact de la nouvelle loi sur les programmes humanitaires, puis c'est encore un peu en développement de notre côté, donc on n'a pas nécessairement des lignes directrices claires à ce niveau-là, mais je pense qu'on essaie vraiment de protéger nos partenaires humanitaires là-dedans, puis que ça ne change pas trop non plus au niveau des propositions ou des diligences raisonnables de notre côté. Mais je vais peut-être laisser juste Marie-Hélène, je ne sais pas si tu as entendu des mises à jour là-dessus.
Non, pas sur des lignes directrices très spécifiques sur ça, mais le point, on prend le point à savoir que ça pourrait être utile. Chose certaine, comme Alexandra a dit, il y a la nouvelle loi qui est sortie, donc on a été un petit peu, pas pris de court, mais ça a été un peu un défi parce qu'on était dans une période un petit peu de transition en termes de loi, et des périodes de transition légale ne sont jamais signe de simplicité. Donc, on a trouvé une façon de s'assurer justement que les projets humanitaires n'étaient pas exempts de la loi, mais il y avait certaines considérations pour pas nécessairement retarder la mise en œuvre ou l'approbation de des projets. Chose certaine, je pense que pour nous, est-ce qu'on va aller jusqu'à des lignes directrices? Honnêtement, je ne sais pas. Est-ce qu'on peut pas fournir ou revisiter dans les lignes directrices des ONG qu'on a en ligne, épurer un petit peu plus la section sur l'environnement? Je pense que ça mériterait une conversation, puis chose qu'on pourrait faire avec nos spécialistes environnementaux à l'intérieur du ministère. Parce que je pense que de ce que j'ai vu des conversations, il y a deux composantes. C'est dans le processus de mise à jour des profils institutionnels, on a essayé vraiment d'aller chercher le plus d'informations possible, ce que vos organisations respectives font déjà de façon c'est dans vos lignes directrices, donc c'est des acquis un peu. Il ne faut pas le prendre pour acquis, mais dans le sens que vous avez des lignes directrices qui vous permettent de respecter les procédures environnementales, que ce soit par le biohazard medical waste ou des choses comme ça. Donc, ces choses-là existent. Donc, on a essayé d'aller chercher cette information-là pour l'avoir dans nos dossiers. Et donc dans les dossiers des spécialistes environnementaux, mais de voir après ça comment on essaye d'être plus clair à savoir quelle information on aimerait avoir de vous. De la même façon que la section pour le genre, c'est vraiment de dire clairement ce qu'on recherche comme information. De l'environnement, je pense que la plupart, c'est des choses que vous avez dans vos documents, c'est des choses que vous avez par les équipes terrain. Donc, est-ce qu'on peut être plus explicite à vraiment les points qu'on recherche? C'est quelque chose qu'on pourrait explorer avec nos spécialistes en environnement. Surtout maintenant que la nouvelle loi est sortie, je pense qu'on a vraiment une opportunité pour peut-être vraiment mettre à jour, puis je pense pas que ça va être une mise à jour très exhaustive, mais mettre à jour les lignes directrices pour les ONG qui existent déjà. Je pense pas qu'on irait malheureusement jusqu'à des lignes directrices spécifiques sur l'environnement, d'autant plus qu'on essaie vraiment de garder ça le plus light touch possible, tout en essayant quand même de respecter la loi et maximiser les opportunités des fois pour l'impact environnement positif de certains projets qu'on a à travers le CAP, surtout pour les réponses à des crises complexes versus les réponses à des désastres naturels. Ça, c'est une autre conversation qu'on pourrait avoir séparément.
If there's no other questions.
Thank you, everyone. Aislinn, I don't know if you want me to jump in here.
Go for it.
Or if you had any words to say.
Just one thing I would add is that thanks to everyone. Can you hear me?
Thank you, Alex and Tara, for presenting and just being with us this afternoon. In the interest of people's times, we do want to wrap this up. Thank you to everyone for participating. We specifically want to express our appreciation for those that came and presented, specifically to GAC, to MSF, MDM, and we just really appreciate the insights that were provided, the information that was provided. Thank you. We appreciate Serge. I don't believe he's online right now, but his ongoing engagement with the HRN network, and we appreciate and Alex and Tara as well, as your faces become familiar to us, and likewise, hopefully. And MDM and MSF, definitely appreciate the lessons learned that you shared with us, and the challenges that we're all wrestling with us when it comes to implementing health programming in this new normal of COVID-19. And how so many of the interventions are countercultural to what so many countries and organizations and projects have been used to implementing. And so a reminder to all of us on the creativity and the innovation that we all need to be engaged in. Just a few things. We do want to remind you about the outcomes document. If it's not in the link, it will share it in the chat. Aislinn will have it there momentarily. And we just really encourage everyone to share your insights and your lessons learned and the resources to share, the ideas for future actions. This is our first time doing a session like this in our triannual meeting online, so we're definitely wanting to get feedback on how the format was, and as Aizen just mentioned in the chat, the brain dates discussions. We're definitely looking for ways that we can improve this. We've been talking together as an executive committee, even on ways to be able to bridge the West and the East a little bit more, and online and virtual sessions perhaps is a way that we want to continue engaging, regardless how long we actually are forced to engage this way. So definitely appreciate your ideas and your thoughts behind that. As Lisa mentioned this morning, we hope to see everyone at the Head of Agencies meeting on June 9th. The registration link was sent earlier this morning. That registration is open, so please sign and yeah, hope to see you there. And then as well, one last item of business, there will be a survey sent out. So again, we just ask that you take the time and fill that out and give us your thoughts. So again, thank you to everyone, specifically, yeah, the presenters, those individuals that also participated in the brain dates discussions. I know the one that I participated on in duty of care was just really, yeah, informative and thought-provoking on some of the issues that that we're all wrestling with. So appreciate that opportunity. So thank you all very much for your participation today.
And thank you to Dorothy for being on the Triennial Committee and helping to plan this all. So as Dorothy said, all the links are there in the chat, but then they'll also be sent to you by email for those of you who registered. So thank you all and hope to see you virtually again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Michelle. Bye. Yes. Great. Great. Thanks so much. Bye. Have a good night.